Good morning. What a blessed day for us to be here in the house of the Lord. Can't think of anywhere better. Be with other believers. And though it may have been 14 years since we've been in fellowship in this church, anytime we've come back, we feel welcome. We thank you, and we know that if you are a visitor here, this is a good place for you. We're here to worship the Lord this morning. And I just want to give you a word of encouragement as we open up this morning. How many of you have ever had stress in your life? How many of you are experiencing stress right now? You don't have to raise your hand. I have found that there's a prayer that helps me whenever I have stress. And it's only 2 words. Lord, help. In the scripture this morning in Psalms 107, that's what it's speaking about is Lord, help. Oftentimes we look at these scriptures and we know, well, God, we call on you when we're in need. Lord, help. And we look at these scriptures and we see that and we just reminded when there's time of turmoil and trouble and strife, all we have to do is say, Lord, help. And he pulls it all back together for us. But then as we go through the scriptures, which we'll read in a moment, after the Lord help and the Lord providing and showing us and helping us, we have something else we need to do. We need to share. We need to share the testimonies of what he has done in our lives. The Lord is transitioning Kathy and I. We've had some stress in the last month or 2. Decision and change. Come here, Pastor Stephen's ministering to us in transition. We're in a time of transition. The Lord is bringing us back here for his appointed time, and we're praising the Lord for that. But in the times in the last few months, I've kept saying, Lord, help. I don't know what to do next. I don't know what the steps I need to take, but I do know where my help comes from. The help comes from the Lord. This morning, if you're stressed, if you're going through something, just ask the Lord to help. And he hears your cry. And he's ready and willing to help you this day. 107, beginning at verse 19, says, Lord, help. They cried in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent out his word and healed them, snatching them up from the door of death. Let them praise the Lord for his great love and for the wonderful things he has done for them. Let them offer sacrifices of thanksgiving and sing joyfully about his glorious acts. That's why we're here today, to gather together with other believers and tell and sing of the glorious acts, the things that he has done in our lives. So some went off to sea in ships plying the trade routes of the world. They too observed the Lord's power in action, his impressive works on the deepest seas. He spoke, the winds rose, stirring up the waves. Their ships were tossed to the heavens and plunged again to the depths. The sailors cringed in terror. They reeled and staggered like drunkards and were at their wits' end. Lord, help. They cried in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He calmed the storm to whisper and stilled the waters. What a blessing was that stillness as he brought them safely into the harbor. Let them praise the Lord for his great love and for the wonderful things he has done for them. Let them exalt him publicly before the congregation and before the leaders of the nation. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, Lord, we come here once again to worship you, to learn more and more about you and your love and your grace and your patience and your times of help when we are in need. And today, we're here to just sing your glorious praises. For all of the things that you've done for us throughout our lives, Lord, how you've brought us out of the darkness, how you have brought us through troubles and trials and tribulations, how that you have lifted us up. Today, we're here to worship you and to praise you for your great works. But God, the greatest thing that you did was bearing the cross for us. And Lord, we give you praise. Lord, we praise you that you died for us to give us everlasting life. And all that we have to do is turn from our ways and follow your ways. And today we give you praise. We lift up a testimony and a praise to you in this house. And today, our praise is yours. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Will you stand with us? Let's do that together. We sing of his mighty acts, his glorious acts. There's only one. Mighty God. Jesus, we lift you up. We sing about your great name. There is a truth older than the ages. There is a promise of things yet to come. And there is one born for our salvation. Sing his name, Jesus. There is a light
Colossians 1:17 says, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. I like the way that says it holds things together. And I think right now it'd be very appropriate for us just to take a moment and have just a moment of thanks to our God, to Jesus, who stands before us, who covers us, who's here with us, who dwells in us. Let's just take a minute. Would you just lift up your hands and would you just thank him? Say, thank you, Jesus, for being my Savior. Thank you, Lord, for covering me in my sin. Thank you for being there. As Charlie said, when you're stressed and you're going through some things, and we can say, Jesus, help. Lord, we thank you today, Lord, that your presence dwells among us, and it says you inhabit the praises of your people, Lord, and we just thank you, Lord God. We just extol you, Lord. We just welcome you into this place. We thank you, Lord, for all the good things, Lord God, and how you're there for us and with us, and we just worship you. And we thank you that we have a Savior. We have something. We have a place to go to. We have something to cling to. And we are not alone today because you are here and you love us today, and you demonstrated that becoming flesh. And you're with us today, and we thank you. What a great thing. Lord, in Jesus' name, amen, amen, and amen. Thank you, Lord, for being here. I'm so grateful to have a Savior. I'm so grateful that he's here, but I'm grateful also that you're here as well, that we can come together and love each other. And so we just want to take just a moment, walk across the aisle, and welcome each other into the house of the Lord. God bless you this morning.
Continue in worship today. Sing of his mighty acts, great things he has done. Worship with us.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you.
Sing with us.
the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, but you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
Amen. Sing that bridge again. He hears us and he sees us.
I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, but you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
Amen. Let's give him thanks and praise together today. Bless him. Bless him. Amen. We are alive only because of what he could do. He so willingly came for each one of us. Amen. Let's continue in worship together. Picture him who was and is to come. The great I am. We worship you, Lord. You were the word at the beginning, and one with God the Lord Most High. Just worship him. Your hidden glory in creation is now revealed in you, our Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. And what a beautiful name it is. And nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. He's so good. You didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. He came for us, Lord. My sin was great, your love was greater. So what could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. Thank you. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. And nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. Just what we've talked about. For death could not hold you. The veil tore before you. You silenced the voice
It's as simple as that. One name, one breath, saying Jesus. Would you just stand in His presence? It's so awesome just to be in His presence, to feel just His touch to the depth of who we are. It lets us know this morning that no trouble can trump the name of Jesus. Nothing you're going through this morning will override the name of Jesus. Brother Charlie started it out right this morning, Lord help. And I believe that He's here this morning just to let you know, to confirm I'm here to help. That He hears us. And then more than that, just calling on His name, He knows our name this morning. He calls you by name. He knows where you're at personally this morning. He knows the things no one else knows. Would you just praise Him for that? Father, we thank You. Oh God, it's so good to be in Your presence this morning. Father, it's good to know that we have a God who is in touch with our innermost problems, the things that we deal with that no one else knows, the things that we may not want to share, or the things that we are trying to keep in the corners, Lord. You're there this morning just to let us know, God, that we can give them to You, Lord. We don't have to announce it to everybody, but Lord, I believe You want us to know this morning You see it already. Give it to You, Lord, and You're going to take care of it. You're going to give us the strength. You're going to lift us up. You're going to walk through it with us, Lord. I thank You, Father, God, that we are called a friend of God this morning, and that, Lord, You are calling each of us by name. Father, it is just so wonderful to be Your children this morning, to be in Your presence, and to be loved by You. I thank You for it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Praise the Lord. You may give the Lord a hand. I tell you, He is awesome. Hallelujah. You may be seated this morning. We want our ushers to begin to make their way as we continue this act of worship. This is just another way that we're giving back to acknowledge that, God, You're in control of our finances, that You're in control of our life, because we stand here this morning knowing if it wasn't for the Lord, we'd have nothing, we'd be nothing. But you know, today You've got a God that loves you so much, and He's here to minister to you and lift you up. Let's pray. Father, we thank You again for Your presence, this tangible presence. Father, You're letting us know, God, that this relationship is real. And I thank You for that. And Father, as we come and give our offering, we give back to You because, Lord, we also know that it's real, that this faith, that this trust, that we give back in obedience, knowing, God, as we give, You are going to give back and You're going to continue to bless. And we just give it to You in an act of worship. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Kids Quest, if you'll stand up and get ready to hit the door, but not too hard. Don't hit Brad, run him over. I tell you what, it's good to see kids in church. Pastor talks all the time, that's the future, and it really is. We're honored this morning to have Brother Wendell with us in service so he can get up here and share his wisdom that he's had, his walked so many years with the Lord, and it's always good. I get something out of it every time. I know Pastor's here this morning because he was a little nervous about what you might say, so We're going to fact check you. That's okay. I'm kidding. You just never know what's going to be said here, are you? It takes a lot of faith to preach in this church, brother. I'm kidding, but would you come, brother? Make him feel at home this morning.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for I was going to get up about 20 minutes ago and greet you and say that with those that have left the church and gone to the beach, I have the privilege of talking to the saints. But I'm not going to say that since Pastor came in. But I intended to, really. Oh, man. Well, I think if I were a weatherman, I'd predict rain. Yeah. Well, this is a little different for me today because normally I preach sitting down, talking to real old people at the nursing home or at 2 different facilities, and some of them go to sleep. So I'll feel at home if you nod once in a while. I had one retired preacher that he was very hard of hearing, and he would sit right in front of me, and he couldn't see either. And I'd be talking, trying to share a thought with the group, and he's right in front, and he would say, "Speak up, I can't hear you." And he would do that. He would think of something, it would trigger a thought, and he would quote a scripture, and you just have to go on. So if anything unusual happens, I'll probably think I'm at home and just go right on. But I do have a thought on my heart. My wife used to say to me, "Why don't preachers have one point?" Said, "You can always remember one point." I got one. She'd be proud of me. But we always enjoy hearing about someone who has lived a life and done something heroic. It's inspirational to be able to hear a story like that from somebody. I thought of a lady by the name of Helen Keller. Some of you may have heard of her, a lady that was born blind and born deaf. Can you imagine what it would be like to be in a world like that? You couldn't see anything, it was dark. You couldn't hear anything, it was quiet. In fact, her family thought that she was like an animal. She was insane, crazy. She didn't have her right mind because she did not know how to respond to anything. All she had was the sense of touch. Until finally, a lady came in to teach her. And this lady gave her love and a healing touch. And her life turned out to be a tremendous success. I thought of Fanny Crosby, who, when just a baby, a few weeks old, she developed infection in her eyes. And a doctor came to try to treat the condition, and he did something terribly wrong. He gave the wrong medicine to her and put in her eyes, and even as a baby, she became blind for the rest of her life. But in that blindness, she wrote probably more religious songs than anybody that lived in our country. In fact, we still sing some of them. But I came across in my Bible reading a couple of weeks ago a man that we all know about, one of the most familiar, one of the most popular men in the Old Testament, the psalmist David. I came across in 1 Samuel chapter 24. I'm not going to read a particular scripture, but I'm going to talk about that passage in this chapter 24 and just share a thought with you this morning. David was a man whom the Bible says was after God's own heart. But I want you to see something about this man who had such a passion for God. And you ask yourself, how did he ever develop a passion for God like he had? Look how he started. As a boy, he was anointed to be king. And then at a still young age, he was welcomed into the court of King Saul with his music. Still as just a young person, he defeated the Philistine nation and became a national hero. Yet, in spite of all of this great beginning, he spent the entire decade of his 20s in the wilderness as a fugitive with a price on his head. Can you imagine a man that started out with such great promise, anointed to be the king, a national hero, and he would wind up spending roughly 10 years of his life, from the time he was 20 till about 30, those promising years that young people live with dreams in their head and in their heart of what they're going to do with their life. But David spent roughly 10 years of his young life running for his life as a fugitive in the wilderness. There were 4 different wildernesses that David found himself running to. You find in that chapter 24 of 1 Samuel. The wilderness of Ziph, the wilderness of Manon, the wilderness of En-Gedi, and the wilderness of Paran. All of these were compressed into one huge wilderness at the south end of the Dead Sea. And for 10 years, a young man who had been crowned, or not crowned, but anointed to be king of Israel, a young man full of promise, a national hero, spent roughly 10 years of his life running from one wilderness to another, just trying to stay alive. The wilderness, to me, is just God's spiritual laboratory. You know, a laboratory is a place where people do experiments, they do testing, and they do analysis of their experiments and tests. And life is sort of like what David experienced in his youth. We're running from one wilderness to another, trying to find a place of safety. And we're being tested. In 1 Peter, the Bible says, the testing of your faith purifies it. We don't really know what kind of faith we have until it's put under the test of living in the wilderness. And that's where David was. The testing of your faith purifies it, and your faith, your testing, your trials, your struggle is precious to God, Peter says. Can you imagine? You feel like when you're struggling, you're weak, you can't survive. But the very struggle of faith, Peter says, is precious to God. You have something in your soul. This morning you feel like you may be tired of the journey and you don't know what the end result is going to be. But that little measure of faith Paul talks about in Romans, that is precious to the Lord. In 1 Samuel 24, that chapter starts out like this. I'm going to paraphrase it. There was a man that came to King Saul. He wanted to ingratiate himself to Saul. In other words, he just wanted to get on Saul's good side. There are people who like to be around authority, sort of get the byproducts, the spillover, the fallout of anything good that happens to leadership. I can get some of the crumbs, enjoy it. I've known a few people like that. You probably have too. This is one of those persons who came to King Saul and he said, I just want to share some news you're going to be interested in. I know where David is. I know where he's hiding. And I know you have one goal in your life right now, and that is to find this young man and to kill him. Saul was possessed with jealousy. He could not share his glory with anybody. His ego was the biggest part of him. And he wanted to get David out of the picture. He felt like that's the only way he could be a successful king, is to have the undivided attention and loyalty of the people. And the man said, he's down in the wilderness of En-Gedi. Saul, the Bible says then, immediately after learning this, one man he's after. But it says he gathers together 3,000 of the chosen men of all Israel. Now he's going after a young man, one young man. He doesn't just go down at the city gate and pick up those who are just idle, standing by with nothing to do. But throughout all Israel, the Bible says he picks out 3,000 chosen warriors to take with him. He wants to make sure, I'm going to get this fella. He's not going to get away from me this time. In fact, it says, I can get him now. I know where he is. And they begin traveling. Can you imagine 3,000 men on this journey from where Saul resided to En-Gedi? I tried to figure out how far it was looking at the map, and it looked like it might be about as far as the east end of Knoxville, and you go to the far border of Loudoun County. That's about how far, maybe about 30 miles. Can you imagine Saul taking 3,000 men on a dusty road, a dirty road? Saul may have traveled by animal, a donkey, maybe a horse. Most of these men had to walk. And they got there and they were tired, they were dirty. They didn't really know where they were going. They just wound up in the wilderness of En-Gedi looking for David. They didn't know it. Saul didn't know it. But he was closer to David at that point than any time he had chased him throughout the wildernesses. Saul was tired. It was a long journey. To walk that far in the heat of the day and having to oversee 3,000 people, it would be pretty draining. And so Saul made his way to a cave. He didn't know it, but in the deep recess of that cave was David and his men hiding there. David saw, his men saw Saul come into that cave. And his men said to him, "It is said that the Lord would deliver your enemy into your hands to do with him whatever you would choose." And David may have entertained that thought just for a fleeting moment, because he takes his sword and he makes his way quietly to where Saul is in the cave. And he takes his sword and he cuts off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. And something happens to David when he's there in this wilderness trying to survive. Something happens. Here he is, the one thing that threatens his existence is there before him. He has a sword in his hand. He can eliminate his problem and immediately become king. But I think an opportunity like this comes to all men. We all want to be spiritual persons. We all want to be godly people. But I believe in every life, God gives us an opportunity. It's not necessarily in the sound of thunder or the flash of lightning, but it's at a quiet moment, like in the middle of a dark cave, when David takes his sword and cuts a piece off of Saul's garment. And the Bible says that David was troubled in his heart. He knew his act was not appropriate. His conscience spoke to him. His heart was pricked, and he knew that something was not right in what he was doing. When we have those quiet times, and God's touch is sometimes so subtle, so quiet, so soft, you can question it. And you can say, was that me? Or was that God? But if there's any desire, any yearning, any feeling of wanting to be more than what we are, something better, to be a person after God's own heart, God saw that potential. And God knows the potential in each of us. He knows who we want to be. Like Paul talks about in Romans 7, the struggle that we all have with the flesh, wanting to be more than we are. He knows the desire of our heart. And David had that feeling in the darkness of that cave when he cut off that piece of Saul's garment. The Bible simply says he was troubled in his heart. And David responded to that. The thought came to me, this could well have been one of the greatest decisions David ever made in all of his life. This moment in the cave with a sword in his hand, and he had the ability to do what he wanted to do with his life. We all have our own personal desires. We want to be happy. We want to enjoy life. We want a good family. We want security. We want all of that. But nobody knows how to give that to me better than me. I can do that better than anybody. I know the steps I need to make. I know the decisions that need to be made. I know what I need to put my hand to. I know the changes. I know the people I need to circumvent on my path that irritate me. I know what questions need to be answered. And nobody knows how to make me happy better than me. David was faced with all of that. And we find ourselves in this wilderness in Gedi where David was. And we come to these situations where, you know, if you just do this, you could solve the problem. It made me remember one of the times of my wilderness journey, and I don't want to burst your bubble, but just as David had more than one wilderness, there are going to be numerous. We travel from one to another. And if you think you can handle it, you're in for a surprise. And David had a decision to make there. It troubled his heart. And he went back and he told his men, do not lay your hand on Saul. David was simply saying, I am not going to try to run my own life. I'm not going to try to make every decision, and I'm not going to have to solve every problem. Life is too big for me. This wilderness journey is something I can't manage. A sword can't defeat an enemy and make life pleasant. And David stood back with his men after he had cut that piece and his heart was troubled. He made his way quietly back to where his men were in the back of the cave. And he continued to watch Saul. And he watched Saul finally walk toward the mouth of that cave. And he watched the silhouette of this man standing in the mouth of the cave and leaving. That, in all probability, could have been one of the greatest moments in David's life, where he took his hands off of trying to manage his own life and let Saul leave. There comes a time when we have to realize just going to church and being a little religious is not enough. We love God, we like to sing the songs and give in the offering and love everybody and live a good life, but still call the shots. But sooner or later, the crisis time comes, and we find ourselves in the wilderness, in a dark cave. And David realized, I'm going to have to take my hands off of trying to manage Saul. I can't handle this man any longer. And David probably stood up when he saw the king march out the mouth of that cave. And I think there's a place in Jesus Christ where we can put self on the altar. I thought Abraham did that with Isaac, and Joseph did that with his brothers. And sometimes we have to do that with the biggest hindrance we have in our life, and that's me. We have to put self on the altar and realize we can't manage life. It's too big, it's too messy, it's too complex. And I would think that David, probably the rest of his life, every time he encountered a difficulty, he could still, in his mind, see Saul walking out of that cave and realize he washed his hands of worrying about managing somebody else, and he was going to turn it all over to God. A wilderness is a lonely place. It's a place sometimes of embarrassment. Have you ever been embarrassed? I have. When I thought about my wilderness, it's a place where you can hurt and nobody knows you're hurting but you. Have you ever tried to talk about somebody when you hurt and you walked away and thought, they don't understand. They didn't hear what I was saying. But people may care, they may love us, but nobody can reach into your heart and give you what you need. Nobody. Pride can be wounded. It can be a humbling place when you're in the wilderness. I had friends that would tell me what to do to get out of the wilderness. But when you find yourself in a place like that, you have to ask yourself a question. Do I really believe what the Bible says? Do I really believe that God is sovereign? Do I really believe that the steps of a good man or a good woman are ordered of the Lord? Do I really believe that? If I do, I'm where I am because I followed Him to this very place. I don't understand where I am, and you do not understand where you are, some of you. But if you can believe the Bible, God is directing our steps. Our steps are ordered of the Lord. The wilderness, for me, became the watershed, the turning point for my Christian life. I had loved God. I had known the Lord. I pastored for several years, been in the ministry a long time. But there's things you find in the wilderness you don't find anyplace else. There are things you learn in the quietness of a wilderness, in the darkness of a cave, you don't learn anywhere else. David could not change his wilderness. He could not change Saul. But we learned our faith was precious to him when we felt like we didn't have any faith. But En-Gedi became the turning point in his young life when he said to Saul, when Saul left and he got a distance from him, David cried out, "My Lord." And Saul turned and said, "Is that you, David, my son?" And he said, "Yes," and he held up the part of the hymn. He said, "I meant you no harm. I meant you no harm. I will let God decide what happens to you, and I'm going to let God decide what happens to me." We come to that place of surrender where you realize you can't fight anymore. You can't carry anymore. And David said to Saul, "I've washed my hands with trying to manage this man that's trying to kill me and take my life. I'm going to let God decide what happens to you, O king, and I'm going to let God decide what happens to me." The miracle of living for Christ is not getting what I want, but getting to know Him. I never learned to know Him like I did in my wilderness. I learned He's always good. You learn in the darkness of a cave, He's always faithful. I'm not going to try to fix everything. That's not my job. It's not your job. You can't fix your life. You can't. Stand in the darkness of a cave where David was, And he said to his men, I'm not going to touch him anymore. I'm not going to try to manage him anymore. I'm going to leave him to God. God will not disappoint. Your faith is precious. Peter said to him, you'll come to know him better than ever when you meet him in your wilderness. Let's pray. Father, I don't know what has been carried to this place this morning, but we have come for various reasons, but deep in our hearts, maybe without us even knowing it, the main reason we all came. Life is too big for us. We can't manage it. But David, this man after God's own heart, he grew into this kind of man because he lived 10 years of running, trying to manage his life in a wilderness. And he finally came to the end of himself and said, I'm going to let God handle it. I can't. And Lord, he found you faithful. We may not understand your ways because they're above our ways. But one thing we learned, you're a faithful God. You're at work on our behalf when we can't see you. You're working on our behalf when we can't feel you. In the darkest day of our life, we can trust you because we have come to know you when there was nothing else to lean on but a faithful God that goes with his children in the wilderness. I'm going to ask you to stand, if you would, please. Nobody can pray for us. We have to pray our own prayers. But like Charlie prayed, I think it can be the most spiritual prayer you can pray when you just cry and beg God for help. If you're in a tough place, you are in the very place where God can do the greatest thing he's ever done in your life. In your wilderness, it can be the watershed moment of your spiritual life. I want us to come and just stand over here from one side to the other in the altar. And Mary Margaret, if you can just sing something about trusting the Lord, his faithfulness. God loves us. And let's just open our hearts to the Lord. God loves us. When nobody else understands us, God loves us. Amen, amen, amen. Praise the Lord.
There is a truth, it's older than the ages. There is a promise of things yet to come.
Amen. Let him hear your cry this morning.
Born for our salvation. He is Jesus. There is a light that overwhelms the darkness. There is a kingdom that forever reigns, and there is freedom
overwhelming theme today of just giving it to Jesus. Surrender. You know, as you start digging through Scripture and you start reading passage after passage after passage, it's this struggle of just letting God do what He needs to do. And when He does it, it's okay. But somehow that innerness of us, that pride of life, we have to continue to keep that in check. And I thank you, Lord, for that word that was delivered today, Lord, that just shows us, Lord, David is a great example, Lord God, just trusting you. And God, when we trust you, it just works. But God, help us, each and every one, as we go through our journey, Lord, we go through those wilderness experiences, Lord God, to reach out and cling to you, Lord God, and trust you. And God, things will happen the way you want it to happen when we allow you to take over, when we allow you to just to help us to surrender. We thank you for that. We thank you for the word that was delivered today, Lord God. Lord, I pray, Lord, as each and every one that came, Lord, if somebody is in a desperate situation, Lord, let them know that you are here today. Lord, that you have spoken, Lord, to receive that word, Lord, and it works. And Lord God, just minister today your supernatural loving arms to wrap around each and every one that are here, that are hurting, Lord God. Lord, as they heard that message, let them to receive it. We thank you for the word. We thank you for your presence. And we thank you for all these things. In Jesus' name, amen, amen, and amen. Lots of wisdom in those words today. God's moving today, and we just got to listen. And that's one of the things, as I grow older, it's just, Lord, help me to hear what you're saying in all these things, because he's speaking. I've heard another man say that God's a chatterbox. He's speaking. We just got to hear what he's saying. But I want to thank you for being here today. And I had several things. If you look, I don't know if you have seen your bulletin yet, but don't forget to take one out with you. There's several really great things happening at Northshore, and just want to make you aware of. First of all, a very important event's happening this Wednesday. It's maybe one of the most important things this next week is us men are going to get together and have some barbecue. So just want to make sure you sign up in the sheet out there. There's a choice of ribs and some pulled pork and some different things. Just make sure you're aware of that. That's this Wednesday. We'll meet here at the church at 6 o'clock. So ladies, take the kids and go do something fun. Us guys are going to come here and have some fun. And also next Sunday, it's a fun time that we have at North Shores. We'll have services out at McPhee Park. And so that's at 10:30 at the large pavilion. We do that every year. So if you need directions, maybe tag one of the ushers or us, and we'll get you there. But there's a sign-up sheet in the lobby for sides, drinks, and desserts. I think Pastor Stephen has got some things in the work to smoke some pork with some fellas. So you'll want to get some fresh pulled pork, and we'll have a great time as we minister in the Word and worship and have a time of fellowship in the park. And then tomorrow night, North Shore's continuing to grow, but tomorrow night at 6:30, we're going to have a baby shower for Kaylee Resonsive. We want to help welcome the baby and give them a shower of gifts. So we want to look forward to that. And then you may have seen that we keep putting Alcoa Springbrook Pool on Playcation, and we're hoping and believing that it can happen. It's a fun time, and they went last year on the first attempt, but this is the third attempt. We're going to try to go again this Tuesday. It's rained us out every week, but we're going to try to do that this Tuesday on Playcation at 10 a.m. at the church. And then one last thing, I don't know if Daniel, really quick, if he can get it over here. We're getting ready for VBS and Into the Wild. Just want to show you on the website. On the very first frame is a registration. It'll click through there, but at the very top, there you go. You'll see that, and there's a little sign that pops up on the left. On the very top right, it says VBS registration. Just some the dates there, and if you scroll down, you can click on register here, and we'd love if you know of anybody, help us just register and get ready for VBS. It's a great time. We've had people come to the Lord many, many times through this. This is a time, an outreach for us to come together and a non-traditional way to show the love of Jesus to those that need him. And so we want to ask you to join us praying how you can serve and sign up in the lobby for service positions for VBS. It's a great time together as we do that. And so there's a lot going on. There may be one or two other things, but you can, if you need prayer or you want to take your next steps card, and you can put that in the box out there. Just that's a way to communicate with Pastor Stephen. We're glad that they drove back from the beach to be with us. We love our pastors. We want to thank Brother Smith for ministering the Word of God. It takes time to study and to pray and seek God. That word is the relevant word today, and it was for you. And so receive that. We thank you for being here and for what God is doing. And next week, we'll see you at the pavilion. So God bless you. Have a great Sunday today. Give the Lord a hand clap of praise.